Welcome to another edition of Legend of Two Games. I'm Isaiah Rose with Frank Tier. This is episode 2. Frank, we are deep in the trenches of March Madness, which is an ideal time for basketball, considering the fact that the NBA playoffs are about 27 days away or so. So we're getting down to the stretch run teams trying to get in the playing the top six, trying to solidify their spots in the standings. So this is ideal for all basketball lovers. Um, One of the things that usually starts to round in the shape around this time is MVP narratives and how, for the most part, the top two players, depending on what year it is, are starting to, or I should say, solidifying their arguments for why they are the MVP. Now, the last couple of years, the we've seen some familiar faces and how they have been not only prolific, but they've been really keystone figures for their team to be successful. How have you looked at this season compared to last season and how those narratives have been building? Who do you think is a formidable MVP for this particular year?
Yeah, all well said. I think the race has been I don't use the word controversial over the last few years, but as we know, Jokic has 3 of the last 4 MVPs, and that puts you into unprecedented territory, right? Like only a select few players have won that frequently in a short span of time, and there are some debates of what the metrics are and are we being consistent across the board from year to year. So this year, Jokic is of course having like a wonderful season numbers wise, right? Denver is in the thick of things, right? But they're anywhere from a 2 to a 5 seed depending on the day. But one person who has had amazing numbers has had like amazing stretches and his team is doing really well is Shai Gilgeous Alexander, right? And some folks argue that he should have won last season, which I think that's a strong the strong argument to be had there. But this year he's even better than he was last year, and OKC is running away with the Western Conference, right? So I think if I were to vote and the end of today, I would think that Shai Gilgeous will be the winner based on how great his team's performing, but also how great his numbers have been, especially post All-Star break, right? It seems like every 5 games he's scoring 45, 50 points. So I just think this is the season for him to win, right? And I do think voter fatigue is working differently this year, right? I think it's working kind of opposite. I think we are praising Jokic as we should, but we're like lauding his numbers for the past few years, right? And acting as if like we're still surprised that this is like how he plays all the time, even when his team isn't playing necessarily as well. So I think things are working a bit opposite than how they usually work.
So you touched on a lot of things there that I think when we unpack it, it really paints a picture towards how we view success and as being very relative. So for the longest time, you reward winning and you reward individual performance. How those individual performers are influencing winning. Now we understand supporting roles play a part in certain things. So depending on how you view a individual's impact, because they may win with lack thereof, that may influence winning. Uh, if we were talking about standings, whose team has been more dominant for a longer stretch of time, that also goes into it as well. For the most part, you always want to reward winning as the be all end all, right? Who is influencing winning? Now, even though Jokic has won 3 of the last 4, the Denver Nuggets have not always been at the top of the standings.
Not at all.
Some years he's won it because, or the narrative was, well, uh, uh, Murray was injured, Michael
Hmm.
Porter Jr. being injured and going to be injured. There's years where the Nuggets have dealt with a myriad of injuries, yet Jokic has been durable. Jokic has put up prolific numbers. they were able to win. When you go back to, I would say, what was that, 2022, when they played or was it 21? No, 2021. They were the 6th seed, I believe, and they lost to the Suns. Or were they the 4th seed? Let's look that up. When he won his first MVP, this was, and I remember this year in particular. This was a year with Joel Embiid was heavy in the MVP conversation as well, and they went with Jokic. So his first most valuable player award was 2020-2021. And he, obviously being more durable than Embiid, played a huge part in it as well. That particular year, Joel only played 51 games out of a possible 70, 72. Yeah. And this year, 2021, Jokic played every game. The Nuggets, they ended up winning 47 games, but again, they dealt with the injuries, so that
Mhm.
played a part in why he won MVP. They respected his numbers. Obviously, as a dominant player, he's going to not only score, he's going to have assists, he's going to have rebounds. And I also think the fact that he's as dominant as he is without being ultra athletic also plays a part in why people respect his game so much
Mhm.
compared to a player that may be physically imposing like a Joel Embiid or Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now,
Mhm.
Giannis also dealt with voter fatigue as well, winning 2 MVPs, uh, but they didn't win championships. So I think going into 2021, he had similar numbers, but I think they wanted to see another face or try to. I don't want to say dismiss Giannis, but also try to shine a light on somebody else who's also equally as dominant. Right now, in the mix during that time, we saw the same faces. It would be Jokic, Giannis, and Joel Embiid. Right. Then when you add into the fact, okay, Milwaukee ended up winning the chip in 2021. Then in 2022, we saw the Denver Nuggets build their way back into that championship conversation, obviously with better health. Uh, then you had the Golden State Warriors working their way back into the mix. They won a championship in 2022. They beat the Boston Celtics. You still saw Jokic in the mix in that conversation,
Yep.
right? So he's winning back-to-back MVPs. They didn't obviously give it to Steph. Steph already had 2 MVPs. They
Mhm.
didn't give it to Giannis.
Yeah.
So and one of the unsung heroes in the conversation during this time is Jason Tatum. The
Yeah.
Boston Celtics are winning a lot,
Yep.
but what's being held against him during this time is the team's depth.
Yep.
Him being young, they said what he has to wait his turn.
Mhm.
But all during this time, we're still talking about who? Jokic, Giannis, and Embiid,
Mhm.
right? So now the narrative for Embiid is building into, well, Giannis got 2, Jokic got 2. When is Embiid gonna get his?
Yep.
He had been in the conversation multiple years. He finished second to Jokic some years. So now it's like, okay, when will it be my turn? Even though the Sixers, compared to all the teams I just mentioned, Milwaukee, Denver, and even Boston, up until that point, before they had won a championship, they had the Sixers haven't been to the finals since 2001.
Nope.
So how is this? How is Jan? Pardon me. How is Joel getting this push to be an MVP without having to really put his team in position to truly win?
For sure.
Right. So again, that goes back to what we were saying about that interwoven narrative-based voter fatigue and
Yep.
how they want to try to position certain players, I believe, into the MVP conversation without it really being a full scope. Um, now come let's fast forward to present day. Shea is kind of moved into where Joel was for some time.
Mhm.
He's been in the MVP conversation. His team
Yep.
has been winning. Uh, Oklahoma City, the number one seed last year. They're going to be the number one seed this year. They lost in the second round last year to Dallas. Let's
Mhm.
see could they get to that Western Conference
Mhm.
potentially finals run. But when you look at what Shai's been doing, Shai is averaging 33 points a game.
Yeah, it's
They have the
remarkable.
number one overall record in the NBA. There's
Hmm.
never been a time where you would say, "Oh, the number one scorer in the NBA." You know, scoring is paramount to everything. The number one scorer in the NBA on the number one team in the conference doesn't get the MVP. How is
Yeah,
that possible?
yeah. With his true shooting splits being through the roof, right?
Yeah.
And his scoring since All Star break being also through the roof, right? We talk about like taking over games late. Other thing that typically help MVP candidates, right? Is obviously true for Shea. So yeah, so I like you said, I do think if we're like contextualizing history and we're saying like how things are happening, I think Shea's the obvious choice this year, but I think he's still battling the ghost of like what you expect Jokic to do, right? Or
Mhm.
what you praise him for. Now, I get winning is important, right? But like you said, it's been Denver didn't win last year, right? It's been some years since Denver's won, right? But we always have Jokic in the mix, right? And he's almost always the favorite, right? So it's like then what are we judging? So like I said, if it ended today, Shea should win the race with how he's scoring, right, and how his team is winning, right. And we have, I think we've played with the metrics and we moved it back and forth for what the metric was for winning MVP, and I do think there needs to be some consistency, right? Because it seems like every few years we kind of change what we expect from MVPs, and I think it does make some folks miss out on like the MVPs who have some amazingly strong MVP candidacies.
So two things can be true in terms of being prolific. You can appreciate the numbers
Hmm.
and almost become conditioned to or expecting certain people's numbers. But I also want to point out that there's been times where there's been recognition for a player's numbers and how gaudy they've been. But once you realize that this is the player standard, you kind of the voting almost says, okay, we expect this. Very let's rewind for a second. Remember when Russell Westbrook got the triple double in
Hmm.
2017?
Yeah.
Uh, he averaged a triple double for the first time
Hmm.
since 1962.
Hmm.
That's Oscar Robinson, excuse me. And actually, Robinson, he won an MVP, but in the first 6 years of his career, he actually averaged a triple double. He had the overall triple double for one season,
Hmm.
but if you averaged out all of the numbers,
Yeah.
he averaged a triple double. He only
Hmm.
got one MVP for that. Obviously, he's battling who at that time?
Yeah.
The Russell, Will Chamberlain. So it's very rare for a guard at that time to get the MVP. He
Hmm.
has one, but they still respected what? The winning, right? Now, when Russell Westbrook does it, it's a lot of it's a lot of things we have to contextualize during that time. It wasn't just the triple double; it was the fact that they had lost Kevin Durant for virtually nothing. He had one of the youngest teams in the NBA at that time. We could look at the on and off splits for when he's on the floor versus when he's off the floor, how impactful he is to them winning those games, and the clutch factor. Uh, in the fourth quarter during that particular season, he was one of when you looked at the usage rate that he had
Hmm.
and you looked at how much he influenced them actually finishing a lot of the games that they did, that played a part in why he won. But during that particular season, you also had James Harden putting up exceptional numbers. The Houston Rockets had an 8 game advantage in regards to wins,
Hmm.
yet Russell won MVP. Now, every triple double is not created equally.
No.
Russell Westbrook went on to average a triple double for 2 consecutive years after that. So 3 straight years of an MVP, of averaging triple double, but he didn't get 3 straight MVPs,
They're not. No.
right? So I think people realize, okay, this is his standard. We respected the fact that he was able to do that
Yeah.
and win at a certain level, but we can't give him the MVP every year just
Yeah.
because of that, right?
Mhm.
I feel like people aren't doing that with Jokic.
I feel the same.
You dig what I'm saying?
Sure.
To win 3 out of 4 MVPs and be in the running for another one, I think that is enough respect right there to say, okay, we respect what you're doing.
Yeah.
But I feel like Shai should probably be a unanimous. Maybe not unanimous because that's only been done one time,
Yeah.
which in my opinion, it probably shouldn't have been that one time.
Uh-huh.
Because there's been other seasons, I think, that have also been unanimous in that way.
LeBron 2013. Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
One
But
vote.
they've never done it before. But they gave it to Steph.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. With that said, though, when you look at what Shai has been doing and how he's been doing it, we could point back. We just brought up Russell Westbrook and Harden during that time, and how Harden had more wins, and Russell still won.
Yeah.
I think that was really the turning point.
Yeah.
In the idea of, okay, we can give an MVP to a player that's not necessarily the 1 seed,
Yeah.
but respect what he's been doing in such a dominant way.
Legit. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but do you think there'll ever be a time? Do you think that now that they've done that, that will always be the precedent and going forward, or do you think we'll work our way back to potentially what it historically has been?
I think we need a happy medium, right? I think nuance is always important, right? I think you award winning and a elite player's impact on winning, right? I do think some years you had to take the full picture and say, cool, this guy has a few less wins, right? His impact was great, right? If not greater. You can play with it if you remove players, right? Like what would it be like? So I do think, right? I don't think it's a perfect answer for this question. I think yes, we award winning, but I think some years we have to look between the lines and think about it that way, right? I think about 2006, right?
Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, so Kobe 35 points per game, right? Not a good team, right? Phil comes back, and LA makes the playoffs, right? Now LA finishes probably
They was 6 that year.
yeah, they finished probably 15 or so games behind Phoenix, right? Steve Nash gets it, right? Folks are outraged, right? I completely understand the outrage and the controversy, right? But I think what gets lost is that Dirk and LeBron has strong MVP candidacies as well, right? Kobe was averaging 35 points, which we haven't seen in a long time. LeBron also averaging 31, 7, and 6, right? You can argue the Cavs are just as bad, right? The Cavs won 50 games that year, or 52. One of them, right? LeBron gets a game from the conference finals, right? Now, Dirk wins 60 games that year, right? He finishes fourth because, as we know, before the rule was changed, if you finish a certain place within your division, right, you couldn't, like, the seed would be off, right? So Phoenix was the highest seed. I believe they won like 54 games. Dirk won 60 games, and he played with really a roster that was inconsistent due to injury, right? Josh Howard was out sometime, and he had 26 points per game, 9 boards. He had shooting splits close to 50, 40, 40, 90. I think it was 48, 40, 90, right? It was like, this guy has a strong case as well, right? And a lot of folks were upset about Kobe not winning that year, right? Fast forward 2 years later, we go to the 2008. Kobe Bryant wins it, right? Great season, but folks argue that it could have been Kevin Garnett. I think Chris Paul could have won it, right? And I believe New Orleans only finished a game behind Kobe, but behind the Lakers. So it's like, well, cool. You have Kobe Bryant, you have Andrew Bynum emerging, you have Pau Gasol, you have Lamar Odom, you have Chris Paul, who had David West, right? But the year before, no one thought the Hornets would be as good, right? You also have Phil Jackson. So I think if you're talking about narrative and impact on winning, I will argue that Chris Paul's numbers compared to only finish one game behind LA should have probably won that award, right? Then you could argue that KG, defensive impact, and then Boston to over 60 wins was also strong as well. So I think every year, right, there's been a moving of the metrics to get folks. And I think year to year, it could be really difficult to put your finger on like what should mean more this year. But I do think we have to get to a place where we find a way to award winning, but also award players putting up amazing numbers, and award how much a player's impact is impacting his team's wins, right? And I think that's the medium that we struggle to get to year after year, right? And it seems like we kind of move the goalposts on what means more what year, right? And it gets confusing, and sometimes it gets unfair to some players who are deserving of an MVP that end up not winning one.
So I wanna build on that right there, because historically we've seen, when we look back on the players of the eras, you want to make sure that all of the guys that are the guys are recognized as those guys through the individual accomplishment of the MVP. So even if you want to say, okay, in the 80s, right, the era of the Lakers and the Celtics, you still have those guys that were the guys, right? So obviously Magic and Bird, they won MVPs, right?
Yep.
Magic won 3, Bird won 3. They have 6. Still got to spread it out. So in 1980, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar got an MVP. And that's the last of his 6 MVPs. The majority of his MVPs come from the 70s, right? Dr. J got an MVP, right? Then you go late 80s. You got Michael Jordan getting an MVP, right? He's not Michael Jordan of the 90s, but he's there, right? So there's always this idea of, okay, you want to make sure the right people get an MVP to represent the history when you tell a story. Now, years later, they're not going to be able to know 20, 30 years from now, they're not going to be able to know the nuances of the season themselves, but they're going to say, oh, Frank Teal was a great guy. He's a great player. He got an MVP, right? If we go through the 2000s and Kobe Bryant would have never got an MVP, that would have been a travesty, right? So you kind of have to find the year. It's almost like, okay, we know 2006, he probably should have been or had a strong case to be MVP. We gave it to Nash. We have to make sure that Kobe get an MVP.
Yes, one.
Right? He got one. So no matter what, they're going to say, oh, he was an MVP player. Now, Chris Paul, could history survive without Chris Paul being MVP? Probably. Even though when we talk about the metrics, the same arguments used for Kobe 2 years prior, having lesser talent, making up for the gaps within that talent. Obviously, expectations exceeding expectations. To win 57 games with Tyson Chandler, David West, Peja Stojakovic, those guys, to be able to still be as dominant as they were. And when we look at what happened in the playoffs, they went 7 games with San Antonio. Second round. They went toe-to-toe. Obviously, him not only being a playmaker, but also having to be the scorer, having to do so much, being that young in his career. I think at that point, he's in year 3. You know, you're like, okay, we can afford to see him not win one, and probably potentially later on in the future
get one, right? Never happened, but the thinking back then is he'll get his time, right? Let's get this top 7 to 10 all-time great player his. I mean, wow, he still had the chance to get it.
Right. Yeah. So now we gotta think. So now you made sure Kobe got one, but there's gonna be a space where, and we've seen it retroactively later, where people say Kobe Bryant is a top 10 player. How does he only have one MVP? But then you're looking at Steve Nash, who's nowhere near the top 10, and he has 2 MVPs compared to a Shaq who has 1, Duncan has 2, obviously LeBron has 4. But they're gonna say, how is it that Steve Nash has 2 MVPs? And you're going to say, okay, what was happening during this time to where this guy who's nowhere near the top 10 has 2 MVPs in the era with Shaq, Kobe, Duncan, right? Allen Iverson has 1, KG has 1, and then out of nowhere, a guy who wasn't really a perennial All-NBA player, a guy who wasn't a perennial All-Star, obviously with
arguably not a top 5 point guard even, right? Before Phoenix, right?
So then you start to contextualize, oh, was it Mike D'Antoni? Is it the system? You start having those conversations, and it brings into question. And I'm not and I'm not taking anything away from Steve Nash because I see the value in what Steve Nash became. The 8-year run he had with Phoenix from 2005 to 2012. You think about the Western Conference Finals runs, all of the injuries he dealt with when it came to Amari, the changeover with personnel, even with coaching. We talk about D'Antoni and Alvin Gentry. He became a Hall of Fame caliber point guard.
Yeah.
Right? So his 2 MVPs sort of validate what that was. But at that time, you're like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
Right? When Dirk Nowitzki only has 1. Right? I think some of that could be said too when you look at a Jokic. You brought up a great point. When you win 3 MVPs in 4 years, that's rarefied air. You're looking at who? Larry Bird won 3 in a row. Magic Johnson won 3 in 4 years. Michael Jordan won 3 in 5 years. Even Moses Malone 3 in 5 years.
LeBron James 5 years.
LeBron James 4 in 5 years. So you're talking about a certain rarefied era of a player.
Yeah.
But we're looking at players before Jokic that have more sustainable championship pedigree in regards to certain things. Now, the one caveat I would say is Moses. Moses only has 1 ring, but he did lead 2 different teams to the finals within 3 years. The Houston Rockets and the Philadelphia 76ers. So that shows you the level of impact he had during the late 70s and 80s.
You also look at who the competition is, right? So in the land of the Lakers, the Laker dynasty and the Celtic dynasty, it's kind of hard to find chips, right? So one guy has 5 in the era, one guy has 3, right? So it's like there's only a few left, right? Most retires after that, so it's tough.
So when I'm looking at Jokic, I think historically, when we look back later, we're gonna say, oh, his numbers were amazing. But if he doesn't solidify it with more championships, it's gonna be like, wow, this guy won 4 MVPs potentially with only 1 chip. What was going on there? Now, obviously, they do have the Western Conference Finals run in 2020, but he didn't win an MVP at that time. That was Giannis. You get what I'm saying? So I'm not seeing I mean, yes, they're winning. They're not. They're a perennial playoff team, but I'm not seeing how they are saying he's a 3-time MVP, 4-time MVP during this block of time like this.
What would be 3 is pushing it? Like it's already excessive. 4 would be what's happening here, right?
Right.
4, you're talking about top 7 player all time, right? Which he's as great as he is, he's not quite that, right?
So I want to build on that for a second too. You have, I mean, this era is so rich in performance. When we talking about maybe, let's say, the last 20 years or so, when we're talking about stars that are durable, stars that have been prolific in regards to their numbers, even across multiple teams. When we look at the last 20 years of basketball, you got LeBron James, you have Kobe Bryant tied in the back end of that. You have Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Jokic, right? You have all of these exceptional players. I mentioned also Kawhi Leonard when he's healthy. Then you have the next tier players like a Paul George or Jimmy Butler. You have so much rich history here within the last 20 years. Where are you looking at this era in regards to infiltrating that top 20? How could I forget Giannis? Where do you see this current generation infiltrating the top 20? And because of the dominance of LeBron James-led teams and Steph Curry-led teams, is very similar to what you said in regards to finding championships. Are you holding that against some players not being able to pierce through that ceiling, or are you understanding that, okay, it could be just one?
Yeah, I've never been the type. I've always looked at the full picture, right? So I've never held not winning, especially in certain eras against folks as heavily, right? You must get one, right? You gotta get one, probably gotta get a few, right? But context matters, right? Who you're playing matters. So I've never been that hard on folks, right? In terms of like, especially if they're playing in like notably tough eras. In terms of players piercing through, yeah, I think this last 20 or so years, from '05 to now, I think in terms of players who like were at an in their peak at the time, or like got into the league, the last 20 years will produce maybe like 5 or so players who end up like hitting the top 20. All right. We got LeBron, we got Steph, right? We got Giannis, Joker. Am I missing someone? Right. I mean, Kobe, of
Kevin
course.
Kevin Durant.
I mean, yeah, right. So we're looking at 5 to 7 players, right? Just now, right? Who've hit that? Who knows how Shea career looks? James Harden is probably on the outside looking in due to not winning, right? But if
Probably. Also, I regret missing him, but also D Wade.
yeah, right.
D Wade. He's a champion in a way that maybe a lot of great players like a Harden or Westbrook are not. But
Yeah.
their numbers and longevity might be better than his.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah. I think the modern era of basketball had definitely made their imprint on in terms of all time. And yeah, we're looking at again like maybe 5 to 8 or so players who will for change who have changed like the ranking, right? Especially like the top 20 guys have a great combination of individual accolades, numbers, and they win enough to be there, right? A guy that sometimes can be hard to argue for due to like, I guess when he became a go-to guy, not really having the most individual accolades, right? But having won a few championships, Kawhi Leonard, right? Kawhi Leonard is someone who like injury has derailed him, right? His all-time numbers won't look as gaudy, right? But he has like one of the most like heralded championships of definitely the last decade, right? Folks like he went out and got that, right? Like Toronto doesn't have rich history, right? And they got him on a whim, right? He's known as like the basketball mercenary for hire, right? So even someone like him, I think he cracks folks like certain like top lists. I think it's hard to fit where, but he cracked the list, right? And it's like he's like someone who won't even have the numbers of other guys. So yeah, so I think these players have definitely made their mark, right? Tatum is someone who we speak about, right? Kind of getting the short end of the stick, right? It's possible he may never end like with an MVP, right? Just by a virtue of who he's playing with, right? And sometimes I wonder if we hold things against him that we shouldn't, right? Like the problem, like him and Jaylen Brown had really comparable numbers during the finals. Folks argue if she got the final MVP. And we always hold how good Boston is and how good they've been since his rookie year against him in a way that may not be the most fair to him. But yeah, if he can rally up a few championships, right? Does he not crack someone's top 30 or so list, right? So it gets really difficult.
I love this. I love the way we've interwoven certain things, especially when it comes to narratives of performance and how it impacts winning.
Yeah.
When you speak to what Tatum has done, right? How consistent he's been, how consistent his teams have been, especially when you look at how his roles have changed. From when he first came in, he was a part of something. He wasn't the sole focal point at that time, but he developed and grew into what he became and what he's sustained, right? And then you look at on the opposite side, you look at a Luka Doncic who came in and had to be a savior for a franchise in a lot of ways. They retooled, revamped it on multiple occasions with multiple coaches, multiple personnels, and yet he was still able to win, be dominant, be prolific, go through the growing pains of winning. Obviously, starting from the bottom, going up against the Clippers for multiple years, really putting on, having huge performances, and recognizing, okay, this player has the potential to lead in a way that you measure individual greatness towards winning. Like, how are you performing on your way to winning, right? Whereas with Tatum, he's he's played both sides. He's contributed to winning, and I don't want to say on a small scale, but um, evenly distributed, right? Then he's been the guy that said, "You have to carry us because we don't necessarily have the." Oh, they've always been talented, but who is going to be the go-to guy? You're the go-to guy, and then as Jaylen Brown has grown into a role where I would always say Tatum is better, but there are conversations that say, well, sometimes you don't know who's better. You don't know whether it's Brown tonight or it's Tatum. Even
Mm-hmm.
though I think, and I think you would agree on some respects, when push comes to shove, the best player is always Tatum. But there are nights where Brown he's looking like the guy, right? So that's used against Tatum in a way that you will want to see great players say, okay, I can compromise my game for the betterment of the team tonight. Jalen has it. I'm gonna follow his lead and do other things. Rebound, be a point guard. Now he's taking on more of a point guard role. And I think a lot of that, because he's willing to play a role within the team, is used against him. I'm saying for Tatum versus a guy like Luka, who he just went to the finals. He didn't have his best performance in the finals, but he's going through the growing pains of the great player. Western Conference Finals appearance, you lose. You get to the finals, you lose. Then eventually you break through, right? But like it seems like Luka is always getting the respect of, yo, he's a top 3 player. Whereas with Tatum, it's like he's easy to forget sometimes. Tatum is durable. Tatum is prolific. He's a perennial All NBA player, similar to Luka. Luka is also those things, but it seems like Luka is the one that gets the top 3 player conversation
Easily. Yeah.
right. With Tatum, it's like they'll look to put another player ahead of him.
All the time, right?
Sometimes it could be Devin. Remember when Devin Booker had his run and it's looking amazing?
The Edwards, even if it's premature, right?
Right. There's always a rush to put somebody ahead of him when he's been consistent, durable, prolific for years.
If you think about the top 10 player performances of the last 5 or so years, right? It's really hard to not name at least 2 to 3 playoff games, but the Tatum's had, right? He has big 50-point games in playoffs.
Yep, game 7 against Philly.
Game 7, yeah. Him and Giannis went toe to toe, right? He
game 6 against the Bucks 2022. Yeah.
Even though this was inconsequential when the Nets were on their running through everyone, right? And it's about to be a sweep. He got 50 against the high power Nets. So it's like, if we are crediting playing big when it matters most, right? Tatum has some type games, right? At moments where his team needs the most, right? He does have the bad finals against Golden State, right? We have to look at which young players don't have bad finals, right? Like that's true for most young players have at least one bad final on the resume, right? Most elite players have one bad final on the resume, right? Mike is probably the only one who doesn't, right? So yeah. So we, in terms of like perennial players, I want to say, right? Magic has his, Bird has his, right? We know LeBron has his with Dallas, Kobe has his, right? So that's a thing, right? That we can't just hold against Tatum. That's like a thing amongst elite perennial players, with the exception of Mike. So yeah, Tatum definitely checks off every box that you would want from an elite player, right? But like you said, it's always this rush to pick guys over him who haven't earned it over him yet, right? And prematurely, and then you have to then like roll back, like, wait, maybe that was a little too quick, a little too premature. But yeah, Tatum is someone who gets lost in the shuffle, right? But regardless of the individual accolades that probably have been held from him in a way that's unfair, if he can roll a few championships, he's another one who will have to alter the way we rank players all the time, right? Just because of his prolificness and his durability over the course of the last 8 or so years. So,
like right now, Tatum this year, 64 games, he's averaging 27, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, right? Those raw numbers alone, considering how great Boston has been, they're not the number 1 seed in the East, but they're top 2 in there. I would say the favorite in the East to
you don't want to play them.
Right. So knowing this, you would say, okay, there has to be a time. There has to be a time where Tatum can get in that top two MVP like conversation. Now, one of the things that's unique about Tatum is that he goes through these spells where he'll score a lot of points. Like he has years where he averaged 30, but it seems like he doesn't score enough at the right time. So Tatum he averaged 30 what was that, 3 years ago? What was that, 2023? And he finished fourth in MVP. Now he's averaging 30.1 during that time. Last year he averaged 27. He finished sixth in MVP. So it's like for somebody that wins as much as he does, to be not in that top three or top five conversation is kind of rare for somebody that wins to the level that he does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going towards, I would say, the back end of this season. What are you looking for from the two main players that we spoke about in regards to Jokic and Shai to really solidify or change the narrative to who's going to win? What are you looking for in this season? What do you think they have to do to really make sure it gets done on both sides?
If you ask me, it's 10-13 game 11. I think it's finished.
Okay.
I think it should be done. OKC is not slowing up. Denver has been up and down of late, right? Jokic has missed time due to injury, right? But I don't think if Shai hasn't convinced folks already that he's the MVP with
nothing he can do.
Nothing he could do, right? So I think the award should be wrapped up by now. I think he's earned this award, right? I think it's fitting for him.
No doubt, no doubt. We'll definitely stay tuned and see how that ends up. We'll definitely cover that and see who finishes it up. I think what's going to be important too, we'll cover this probably in a couple of weeks or so. All NBA this year is going to be very unique because of key injuries, and I think when we speak to that narrative of great players over the last couple of years, some of the older guard of players is starting to fade out, and who of the younger generation will step into that. We'll definitely cover that going forward.
Does Steph make it?
It's gonna be debatable. The Warriors have had a strong stretch over the last 18 games or so, and because of name recognition, because of being established over a period of time, there's going to be some people that will be hard pressed to let that name go.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have young players that have been putting in that work that want to, pierce through that ceiling.
A Mitchell Cade, right?
Right.
It'll get tough, right?
Who's another player? Before we wrap up, I just want to speak to that. Donovan Mitchell has been a player that has been on winning teams his entire career. He's been number one in a conference before. Yet still, in my opinion, has never truly gotten MVP consideration. The Cleveland Cavaliers have been number one in the East for the majority of the season, and for a strong period of time this year, they've been in the running with Oklahoma City for overall best record in the NBA. But nobody is saying Donovan Mitchell. Now, Donovan Mitchell's numbers aren't as prolific. I think this year he's averaging, 24, 25 points per game. But he's doing the right things. He's making sure that all are involved. Everybody is coming into their own. And I think that plays a part into why Kenny Atkinson is probably going to be coach of the year this year. The level of performance he's been getting from Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, Jared Allen, Ty Jerome, and others, you see why and how that team is good. But the best player on that team should get that MVP look, no?
Yeah. It's for sure. Mitch's numbers aren't as great this year, but they've been really good in other years, right? And his team always, I think, exceeds how much you expect them to win, right? During the regular season, right? Now, perhaps folks have it in their mind that he's gonna flame out in the playoffs, right? And they hold that against him. But yeah, you would think that someone who consistently that good individually with teams who are consistently perform well and they see what you expect, we'll get some MVP nods, right? And he's not mentioned at all, right? Like I think we discussed him. Folks might say, "What are you talking about?" Right this year, right? So it's odd, right? Some guys just don't get the benefit of the doubt in a way, and I think you do need to assess why that is with some folks, right? Why can't you have somebody consistently great who has a consistently good record who just we don't talk about in for an award that's supposed to reward greatness and team success.
Now, I think this is one you just mentioned it, but this is one thing that we didn't get to mention. Usually, that first MVP for every player is the MVP where it's oh man, the team exceeded the expectations. Let's reward the individual dominance of the player plus that. So you look to Michael Jordan's first MVP in 1988. It was in the heart of the Magic and Bird era, but the Bulls had made that jump. They not only made the jump, but Mike was averaging 35, so it's not a fluke from the last year when he was averaging 37. He followed it up, Defensive Player of the Year. All of the individual things came together with the team finally cracking the 50 win plateau and him being dominant, right?
Yeah.
You look at LeBron James, 2009.
Yeah, they went silly, right? Could they lose? Could they lose at home, right? And his numbers, I guess you expected that he would be great because he was LeBron, right? He's had 230-point years to the point, but
from 50 wins to 66. That's
what's going on here, right? He made it finally like whoa, like this is and of course analytics gets murky, but value over replacement. I think we're looking at like if he's not on this team looks like they're fighting to stay above like lottery grounds as opposed to a team that's won 66 games, right? It looked like you would take away at least half or 1.5 the Cavs win. So it's like, okay, yeah. There's always a thing where great player expecting to be great, but there's the team success catching folks off guard that really typically elevate somebody to get an MVP award for sure. That's been part of it for a very long time. That's kind of why Steve Nash got hit initially, right? It was the element of surprise.
Right. 2005.
This good. Yeah.
Right. You can also look to Derrick Rose, 2011. In the heart of LeBron James' run, even in Cleveland going to Miami, still the best player, but the Bulls come out of nowhere. They win 60 games. This young player taking off. You look at it like it's almost very reminiscent to Chris Paul's MVP or MVP caliber season, but you got to add into the fact that people were upset with LeBron and how he shifted the paradigm going to Miami to team up with Wade and Bosh, right? Numbers be damned. LeBron was still efficient. LeBron still had similar numbers. LeBron was still LeBron James. But when you add all of that in with this team out of nowhere jumping to 60, Tom Thibodeau in his first year with the Bulls, that plays a part in why Rose won MVP. I mean, you look at his numbers at that time, 25-7. What is he shooting at that time? 46%. Very good, but you can see his impact being tangible to this jump that Chicago made, right?
Miles games, he's being the best players on TV, right? He's had game winners, he's hitting clutch shots, right? So like there's the individual performance, good enough, right? 25-7 are good enough, right? The team success checkbox, and then there's the narrative checkbox, right? Okay, cool. The team came out of nowhere, he's leading, he gets it, right? And that's missing from some of our more recent MVP seasons, right?
But then why can't that same metric be used with Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah,
who
you're right.
Team is coming out of nowhere. Kenny Atkinson's first year in Cleveland.
Yeah,
he's taking a personnel that was very similar to last year. They're at the top of the East, and Donovan Mitchell, while being a great player, the highest he's ever come to being MVP was what year is that? That's 2003. Yes, 2003. His first year in Cleveland, he was 6th in MVP voting, and he averaged 28 at that time.
Yeah.
This year, Cleveland is running through the East right now.
On the East skid now, but running through
they're on the skid now, but
running through the East.
56 and 14 through 70 games.
Yeah,
he's having 24 game. He's not getting the same looks.
Yeah.
So I mean, but that goes back to our overall arching point of this episode, that narratives and certain components are constantly shifting, and if you're not paying attention, you can lose sight as to why it's happening.
Legit, right? Having a strong context of history is important for how you assess anything going forward, right? Because you might get like, okay, this happened this year, but like, and I think you have weaker arguments if you don't bring in history, and like how we haven't been consistent in our metrics for MVPs from year to year, right? That's important, right? And that's how I think, correct course if we're going to, right? Just making sure that we understand, okay, well, this he did this way, he did this way. Let's make sure we get back to a medium, right? To make sure that we give folks their just due in that year, right? And we aren't just getting so lost in a newer approach to giving this award out that we disregard what we've done for the last God knows how many years. So
100%. Great things said. Thank you guys for tapping in and tuning in with us. We'll be sure to not only get this episode up, but multiple coming forward. So thank you for watching. This is a Legend of Two Games. I'm Isaiah Rhodes. That's Frank Tier. We'll tap in soon. Peace.